of our patients, I don't know. He spent a lot of time on studying the gut and the leaky part of it. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, the do's and don'ts of how to be healthy that way. As chiropractors, we believe that the central nervous system is the most important organ in the body. But what's number two? Some people say the heart, some people say the gut. Today we'll talk about how we think the gut's one of the very crucial parts of our health. So, let's give Ben a big round of applause.
Thanks, Scott. As Scott said, and there's a reason I have this turned off, and you'll see when it turns on. But my name is Dr. Ben Stukel. I'm from Gregory, South Dakota. My lovely wife, Sky, is back in the corner. We have 2 kids who happen to be over there and have been threatened with their life to be quiet for the next 4 hours. So I apologize to them right off the bat. But, you know, my wife and I have been traveling around doing some of these talks, and you'll see the topic there. That's probably why I didn't want it up, as everybody's eating. I'm not sure I agree with that decision, but that's okay, Scott.
If you're in our office, we generally talk about poop. So
yeah. You know, talking about poop does something special. It makes people uncomfortable, and that's great. You know, because it shouldn't, but you know, you watch when you say the word, certain things happen, and what I see is I see women cringe and guys start to get jittery and elbowing each other, and they're all excited. He said poo. So anyway, we're going to be talking a little bit about the gut, and therefore we will be talking about poo. Maybe not in those words, but anyway, we've been doing this business. I've been a chiropractor for 14 years in Gregory the whole time. Always had a huge interest in nutrition and healing the body, not just through chiropractic care, but also through the nutritional side. And so I've traveled around doing some speaking on various topics, but this one seems to be well received in all audiences because it's kind of a buzzworthy thing. You know, people are starting to understand that there is something big about the gut, and the gut has a lot of control over our life. So, and we'll go through that tonight. But anyway, we've been doing this business now for about 4 years, and the business I'm going to talk to you about is just a nutritional business that helps us become healthy. And Scott and Don have joined me in that business, and I'm not here to provide a sales pitch by any means. You're going to take a lot away from tonight. Whether you decide that a program is for you or not, we're not here to sell it. We're here to just give you guys an education and kind of teach you about the gut so you can have a little more awareness of what you should be doing in your life to help heal it. So, without further ado, this particular presentation I put together about 1.5 to 2 years ago now, and I probably have close to 30 or 40 hours of work in this thing. It's a lot of research to sift through, but it's all really good research, and it's all from really good universities, good journals. Everything's backed by science. So I'm not just pulling things out of thin air here. This has all been pretty well documented. So you can see a few of the universities, Cambridge, University of Oregon, Stanford, University of Cal Davis, and Harvard, and that's just a few. So a lot of time spent and a lot of good resources. The goals of this presentation are fourfold, or maybe 5, if you will. We want to go through just some basics on what, you know, the knowledge of the gut, so you guys understand what we're talking about, and then learn what causes damage, so you can learn to avoid those things. We're going to talk a little bit about obesity and the relationship to disease, because it does have a direct effect. And then we're going to learn how to prevent, heal the damage that's been done to the gut. And at the very end, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the program that we use in our clinic, and Scott and Don are starting to really use, how it fits into this whole picture. So we'll put that all together at the end. So, the gut, what is it? Basically, It's from input to output, right? Top to bottom. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to talk mostly about the small and large intestine. We're going to talk about what's on those blue arrows, which are called the tight junctions. So we have mucosal cells in the gut, and in between each one of those cells is a little space. It's called a tight junction. And those spaces are extremely small. They're one cell thick, approximately 1,000,000 times smaller than the head of a pin. So that puts in perspective how fragile they may be, right? How easily that could become separated and allow things to get through that probably shouldn't. So it comprises approximately 80% of our immune system, so it has a huge part, or plays a huge part, on our health through our immune system. There's 100 trillion, approximately 100 trillion bacteria, which is more than we have even cells in our body. So one could argue maybe that we're even more bacteria than we are human, right? That's a little crazy if you start to think about it. It has its own functioning nervous system with more neurons than even the central nervous system. So as Scott alluded to, we have our central nervous system, and that's the idea of chiropractic is based on healing the nervous system and allowing proper function and getting that part working. But we also have the enteric nervous system, which is basically the gut's brain. So our body has the brain up here, our gut has a brain as well, and that's in the enteric nervous system. So that should paint a picture for you how important our gut is, what part it plays, how it affects our brain. We have messages from the brain out to the gut, but same thing happens back to the brain from the gut. This graphic got screwed up, but behind that first circle it says the good bacteria. So what's so great about good bacteria? So within our gut, within our ecosystem, if you will, you have good bacteria and bad bacteria, and we need both. I don't want you to assume that it should be all 100% just the good stuff. We have E. coli bacteria inside of us, and it's supposed to be there. But just at very small percentages that's kept at bay by the good bacteria. So what's so good about the good bacteria? As you can see there, a couple things. It produces some neurotransmitters, or helps produce those. The neurotransmitter, like GABA, it's called a neuroinhibitory transmitter. And what it does is it gives us a calming activity in our nervous system, so it calms us. It has to do with the production of glutamate. Glutamate has to do with learning capabilities, memory, things like that. So extremely important. Again, how the gut affects the brain. And then serotonin. Serotonin is a huge one. Serotonin is your mood, your appetite, your sleep, your sex drive. All four of those things are directly affected by serotonin. So how important is that one? If we just had that one alone, I think we'd all be pretty happy. The good bacteria also help turn off cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol and adrenaline are stress hormones. They play a very, very important role in our life and in our system. We need them, but we need them in small amounts and short bursts. And so what the good bacteria do is help turn those down when they need to be turned down. So when they come in, they get us out of trouble, and we should get rid of them, and good bacteria help with that. They help decrease hypersensitivity to pain. That was actually a Harvard study I read, and it had to do with like rheumatoid arthritis, arthritic conditions. So if you know people that have arthritic conditions, healing the gut may actually reduce the pain and the inflammation associated with that condition. And then of course they're key for absorption of vitamins and minerals. And that's just the idea that the bacteria break down the foods we eat to a much more, a better size, if you will, so that we can absorb them at a higher efficiency. The gut and the immune system. Huge role. Again, it's 80% of our immune system is really started or produced down here. So we really want to take care of it. It's second only to the skin for contact with invading pathogens. And the skin is constantly attacked, as is the gut. Our microbiota, which is the good bacteria or the ecosystem, comprises about 3% of our total body mass. That's where those 100 trillion cells come in. And there are about 10 times as many bacteria as there is cells in our own body. It never stops working because of constant exposure to unhealthy things. So we're constantly firing, if you will, to get rid of pathogens, virus, bacteria, all kinds of different things that we're exposed to. So it never shuts down. Overactivity can equal allergy and misdirection. If you have too much allergy and misdirection, it ends up with an autoimmune disease. So I don't know how aware you are of what autoimmune is, but it's basically when your body starts attacking itself. Things like ALS, Parkinson's, MS, all of these are forms of autoimmune diseases and can in fact be traced back to some degree straight to our gut and to leaky gut syndrome, which I'll talk about. The graphic there, which you probably can't read, is just the idea that our gut produces these CD4 T cells, and they provide messengers to the body that do very specific tasks. They protect us against parasites, they control infections, protection against intracellular microbes, and regulation of our immune system. So again, the gut is producing the very cells that do those actions. So very, very important. So leaky gut. Most everybody at this point has started to hear about leaky gut. It's been an idea that was started a number of years ago, but has really become very, very, very big in the nutritional world anyway, and in any of the natural homeopathic world. The idea of leaky gut is what that graphic shows. So on the left, you see a healthy mucosal cell system where the cells are nice and tight together. The tight junctions are connected. There's really no room to get through. So you have the bad stuff on the inside of the gut on top, and you have the good stuff that's on the outside. You got your blood and lymphatic system. On the right-hand side of that graphic, you'll see what happens in leaky gut. And again, those little tight junctions start to break apart or start to stretch open. And so things start to leak out that aren't supposed to get out. Basically, we don't want our poop in our blood and lymphatic systems, right? And those very systems travel straight to our brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. So we don't want those things out there. So why not? What's in that, and what happens when it does start to leak out? And that's one concept you really want to get here is what are called the lipopolysaccharides. And the lipopolysaccharides are what the bacteria are mostly made of. 50 to 70% of the bacteria in the gut are made up of lipopolysaccharides. Why is that important? Lipopolysaccharides inside the gut are great. They're supposed to be there, everybody's happy, it's a good calm system. But when they get out of the system and they cross through that barrier, through the tight junctions and get into the blood or the lymphatic systems, as soon as they touch any other tissue, they cause an explosion of inflammation. That explosion of inflammation is so big and so large that the scientific world, the scientists that study this stuff, use lipopolysaccharides. They actually inject them into tissues to create a massive inflammatory response so that they can study how the body deals with it. So outside the system, they're a huge no-no. But inside, they're just fine. As long as we keep them there, everybody's happy. There's been increases found in the blood and brain of Alzheimer's and ALS patients. There's actually been increases found in blood of asthma, autistic, ADHD patients. So you start to see that these diseases may very well be related to this very thing right here. These lipopolysaccharides escaping out and getting where they're not supposed to be. Make sense? Again, when injected into mice, resulted in severe memory loss. The list goes on and on and on, and it starts to really form an idea that when these guys get out, they start to affect the brain and the rest of the body. So let's talk about why this happens. Why does the gut wall weaken? What goes wrong? This graphic gives you an idea of some of the cause, most of the cause. We're exposed to toxins. Everybody knows that. We're exposed to toxins constantly. Our environment is bombarding us every day, every hour, every minute, every second. Those toxins include artificial sweeteners, whether you're trying to avoid them or not, they're out there. Pesticides, herbicides, medications like antibiotics, NSAIDs can affect the gut. bad bacteria. Again, bad bacteria aren't necessarily that bad if they're kept in check. It's when that balance gets thrown off. When you get too many of the bad going in your gut, you're going to end up with leaky gut. Stress, not that any of us have that. Increased blood sugar and gluten. And gluten's a hot topic, and we're gonna kind of break these down a little more. But first, we're going to go through the next topic in our goals there, which was to talk a little bit about obesity. So all these things right here create inflammation in the body. The body becomes inflamed systemically, and we start to gain weight. Obesity in America, 1990, not that long ago. At least I don't feel like it's that long ago. Less than 15% of people were considered obese. In just 2010, 20 years later, greater than 25%. We go just to 2015, a few years back, 66% of adults and 26% of children are considered overweight or obese. We put those together there. That's huge. That is a trend going the wrong direction, people. And you can see it. Just go out on the street and you will see our culture, our nation is in trouble and we're going the wrong direction. So where are we headed? The idea of this whole thing and why we're here is to hopefully turn that thing around. And knowledge is power, so that's what you want to have. $147 billion annual treatment costs just for obesity. That comes out to close to $500 for every single person in the United States every year. How powerful if all you did was buy healthy food or work with nutritional supplements, you utilize that $500 to put it towards something that actually could help us turn this around. Very, very powerful. When does obesity begin? And this was hotly debated for a while. These studies have really kind of given us an idea of where to start. 2014 study, University of Oregon, obesity during pregnancy, so the mother being obese, harms the baby's stem cells that help regulate metabolism. So, in effect, basically obesity begins before we're even born. And it has to do with what? Our parents, generations before. So that obesity during pregnancy should be addressed because it can change the baby just from the get-go. Another 2014 study, Cell Journal, obesity during pregnancy may cause the baby to develop abnormal neuronal circuits related to controlling appetite. So how big is that? We have kids that are kind of cut off at the legs before they even start. They're having trouble controlling appetite, and it's because they were handed a partial deck of cards, if you will. So then you could argue, well, is it all just genetics? Is none of it up to us? Well, genetics or epigenetics, and I want you guys to understand the difference. Genetics is what we're handed. Epigenetics is what we do with that. You may be born with the switch, but will you turn it on? That's the idea I want you guys to get about epigenetics. Epigenetics is, look, just because your parents had heart disease doesn't 100% mean you will have heart disease. You have to make the choice to turn that switch on or off. The research suggests that it's close to 70%, but 70% is environmental, 30% is your genetics. So you have control over the lion's share of what's going to happen to you, even if your parents are genetically handing you stuff you didn't want from the start. Does that make sense? So we choose to turn that switch on and off. How do we do that? Through diet, lifestyle, taking care of our nervous system, things like that. Is all fat created equal? The graphic's not shown up there, so I'm going to explain it a little bit to you. These are cross-sectional MRIs of the abdomen of two different patients. Both of these patients, outwardly, to the naked eye, would look obese. You would look overweight because of this white that's on the outside here. And that's called subcutaneous fat. That's what we see. That fat is not nearly as dangerous as the fat that's on the inside. And I wish this showed up better, but there's white in and around the black splotches, if you will, in there. That white is called visceral fat. It's fat that's packed in around our organs. So we're shoving it in and it's pinching off all those organs and systems. This person, a lot of subcutaneous fat, but in and around the organs, very little visceral fat. So even though they both appear to be overweight, one may or may not be more healthy or less healthy. Visceral fat, the one that's in and around the organs, increases inflammation, interferes with our hormones, dumps chemicals into the liver, which creates more inflammation. It's linked to cancer, autoimmune disease, brain disease. It's dangerous because the person may appear thin. That's another big one. The idea of metabolically obese, normal weight, extremely dangerous condition. Why? Because we look at ourselves in the mirror and we look thin. But in and around those organs is just fat, packed in. And the research says that visceral fat has a much higher relationship to mortality than subcutaneous fat. So death. So it has a higher relationship to this particular fat. So these people who may appear thin, and we all know some, right? They're the people that they can go eat anything, quote unquote. They could eat McDonald's every day and they never gain weight. They're so lucky. Everybody says, oh, you're so lucky you can eat whatever you want. Are they really lucky? No, because then they start to feel that way. They're bulletproof. But yet they're living with all this visceral fat and they're basically a ticking time bomb. The people who are actually overweight, they may look in the mirror and they might actually realize, look, I need to get this under control and take care of myself. So understand, we're not here talking just about outwardly, visibly obese people. We're talking about skinny people that are just really, really unhealthy and how dangerous that can be. Insulin. Let's talk a little bit about insulin. It's a hormone. It has a very specific purpose and a very good purpose. It's very healthy in that it ushers our energy from the food to the cell. Very simple, right? It's what it's supposed to do. It finds the sugar, binds to it, hauls it to the cell. It's a great thing. Your pancreas secretes it, it does its job, and it's supposed to be used up and gone. Problem is, a few other things that it does when it sticks around too long, or we have too much of it. Promotes fat formation and retention, stimulates inflammation, and creates hormone imbalance. Insulin's kind of a funky little hormone because the research says that insulin itself is actually anti-inflammatory to the body, deflames us, but when it sticks around too long, it totally swaps and it becomes inflammatory. So it's a good thing when it's used and done right, and it's a bad thing when it sticks around too long. Kind of like stress hormones, cortisol, things like that. So these things are supposed to be used up and gone. Insulin resistant, have you heard that term? Okay. Chronic exposure to sugar causes decreased unloading. What I mean by that is on every cell there's thousands of these little unloading docks, little garage doors, if you will. And what happens is as the insulin is binding to the sugars and hauling it to these garage doors to be unloaded, it's unloading, but because we're consuming too much, all of a sudden the garage doors and the receptacles start saying, whoa, 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 I'm overloaded. They start shutting garage doors. We shut more and more of them, and all of a sudden there's nowhere to go with it. And so, what did I just say? Insulin becomes inflammatory. Well, if we continue to eat, as we continue to eat, we shut more and more of those doors, which means there's more sugar floating out there, which means we need more insulin. That's insulin resistant. There's nowhere for it to go. What does the body do? It earmarks it and says, store it as fat, which creates a whole nother problem. Obesity and our gut bacteria. So what's the connection? The connection is this. So on that graph, you see two major things: Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. Those are the 90 to 95% of the good bacteria in our gut fall into those two families. And the relationship should be somewhere around 80-20. Or it is 80-20, I'm sorry. 80-20 is what the Western biome is, what most of us have, which is not good. 80% Firmicutes, 20% Bacteroidetes. It should be about 55-45. So we're way off. We have way too many Firmicutes. Why is that important? Firmicutes, if you can read that, are calorie-loving bacteria that are equipped to digest carbohydrates easily. They're carb cravers. Why do you think our society is becoming obese and loves our carbohydrates? It's because these bacteria are taking us over. They turn on genes that increase the risk for heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. From the journal Science in 2013, when gut bacteria of obese mice were put into skinny mice, the skinny mice gained weight. Changing nothing else, just changing the bacteria. So they're giving them more Firmicutes, if you will, and saying, okay, let's just keep eating the same thing and see what's happening. I'll be darned, they start gaining weight. And that's just our bacteria. So are we driven to a degree by our bacteria? Absolutely we are. Then there was a twin study, University of Washington, 2013. That study took a set of twins, female twins. One of them was considered obese, one was considered of normal weight. They extracted some bacteria from them, took 2 mice, regular slender mice, that were born with no bacteria on purpose, and they input the bacteria from the 2 twins in. I'll be darned if the slender twin, the bacteria to that mouse stayed slender. The bacteria to the slender mouse from the heavier twin, the mouse started gaining weight. So now we know from mouse to mouse it happens. We know that from human to mouse happens. What about human to human? Lean male donor fecal microbiota, or microbial transplant in males with metabolic syndrome resulted in a significant improvement in insulin sensitivity in conjunction with increased intestinal microbial diversity. Such diversity may induce increased mitochondrial activity, prevention of metabolic endotoxinemia, and activation of intestinal glucogenesis. I'm sure you all understand exactly what I said. That's where most of my time goes, is trying to decipher what these guys are even saying. A skinny guy's poop was transplanted into an obese guy's gut. The obese guy then showed better blood sugar values, better gut health. This may result in increased energy in his cells, prevention of further leaky gut and inflammation, and the ability to feel full after eating. Proves our point. So even human to human, just changing our bacteria can change our whole life. So what damages our gut? What we went through the ideas of the toxins and stuff. Let's look at the percentages. So you can see there, 13% is our genetics. It's what we're handed, or epigenetics, what we do with that. The one I want to talk about real shortly before I go off this slide is the next one, our environment. And within our environment, really what I want to talk about is the antibiotics. Because this seems to be a player back to even maybe when we were kids, how many antibiotics we were on. Because understand, antibiotics go to kill bacteria, right? But they were supposed to, when it all started, and I'll go through that in a minute, they were supposed to kill the bad bacteria. But because of changes in our society and what's happened in our medical system, we are now given very broad spectrum antibiotics. They just kill everything. Just kill it. Wipe it all out, and everybody knows it's gone. Problem is they're killing all the good bacteria too. So with antibiotics, Alexander Fleming, 1945 Nobel Prize. In 1942, there was a young woman who had a baby, had a miscarriage, and she ended up with a terrible, terrible infection. Timing happened to be perfect for her, though, because he was working on these antibiotics, developing them. He hears about this young woman. They decide that she should be the guinea pig. They fly the antibiotic that he's working on, penicillin. They fly it across the country to the Upper East Coast. A state trooper grabs it, drives it up there. They give this to this young woman, basically on her deathbed. Within days, she's miraculously better, and within a month, she's fine. And that was just lowly old penicillin, right? And just a little dose. At that time, antibiotics were so cool and so important that they actually strained her urine. Her name was Ann Miller. They strained her urine to try to get more of it out so that they could treat more people. That's how powerful they used to be. Think about that now. I mean, these antibiotics are crazy powerful, and they're still not doing it. Why is that? It's because Mr. Fleming, back in his day, in 45, when he gave his Nobel speech, he even said, and I'm not going to quote here, but the idea, he said, there will come a time, because these are so good, and they work so well, that they're going to become over-available to everyone. And so they're going to get overused or misused to the point that we are going to see bacteria come back again. Where are we at now?
Yeah.
We're there. That's exactly where we are. And it's because of this. So that puts it in perspective. You see, and antibiotics are everywhere. We're exposed to those in places we shouldn't be. We're not going to go into that, but so there's the idea of antibiotics. And that is a big one. If you really look at the research, most people who have a gut issue, a severe gut issue, were on a lot of antibiotics when they were kids. A lot of ear infections, whatever. You'll see gut issues with them. And then the last one is the diet: fructose, high fructose corn syrup, fake sugars, like sucralose, aspartame, things like that you guys have heard of. Those all do damage to our gut. And then gluten, and we're going to go through those now. So fructose, high fructose corn syrup, fake sugars. Extremely detrimental to our gut and to our good bacteria. Study 2014 clinical nutrition. High fructose corn syrup caused good bacteria to actually exit the colon. They're getting out of Dodge. And that was increased 30% with high fructose corn syrup. Fructose is the one that made him exit. So regular consumption causes all kinds of risk factors, twofold increase in the risk of diabetes. So it's a real problem. I mean, high fructose corn syrup, I'm sure you've all heard of that. It's so big of a problem that even companies are getting away from it, like Coke and things like that. They're even smart enough to say, this is real sugar now. We're not using high fructose corn syrup anymore. High fructose corn syrup, fructose, sucralose, food for pathogenic bacteria that cause a decrease in leptin. Leptin is a hormone that tells us when we're full. So when we eat, we start to produce leptin. When it hits a certain level, we know to stop. Well, if we don't produce that hormone, what is that going to lead to? Back to obesity again. Gluten, very, very popular subject. What is gluten? It's become popular, become a staple in the last 40 years. That's when gluten basically came about or changed, and it was due to some GMO practices where they started with what's called a semi-dwarf wheat. It has to do with pesticides and herbicides and how resilient it was. Wheat also changed back in the 1800s just because of the processing of wheat when we industrialized and were able to grind it and turn it into flour and things like that. It's dangerous because of antibodies to the brain. There's a specific protein in there called gliadin. Gliadin mimics proteins that are in our brain, and we attack gliadin. Well, what happens then? Our immune system looks at gliadin and says, we need to get that out of there, and it so closely mimics some of the proteins in our brain, we end up attacking our own brain. Again, autoimmune. It affects everyone. I said it. Everyone has a gluten issue. Now, you may not know it, you may not feel it, it may not be something you're aware of, but it does affect you. It does cause an inflammatory response. And causes some degree of leaky gut in everyone. That's a Harvard study. It's a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye, of course. And the graphic up there tells you just how popular it's become. I actually found a site where it says gluten-free singles. So, I mean, that's how big this is. Everybody knows about that. From a human nutrition standpoint, it's ironic that wheat milling, which is what I was talking about, methods to produce white flour, eliminate those portions of the wheat kernel that are the richest in proteins, vitamins, lipids, and minerals. In classic United States form, we took something good and made it worse. Gluten in the gut. So gluten causes GI damage and leaky gut. It's development of additional allergies, autoimmune disease, like I said, malabsorption of vitamins, which causes immune system deficits. It causes to have trouble healing tissues, and then alters our gut bacteria, which causes increased risk of infections like yeast and bacterial infections and immune system dysregulation. Again, autoimmune. 2013, Mayo Clinic study. Mice susceptible to type 1 diabetes. So there goes the genetics. Genetically, they were susceptible to be type 1 diabetic. But fed no gluten never did become diabetic. Those that were fed gluten did. So there's the epigenetic connection. We flip the switch on. Consume the gluten, you turn on the switch. So what's the answer? There really does have to be something simple, and that's what everybody wants. They want to know, well, how much work is this going to take to fix? Because we all have it to a degree. A program with an easy food plan to follow. And I'm going to go through that next. Which supplements? The million-dollar question. I know it is in my practice. What should I be taking? What should I take on a daily basis? How often should I take what? Well, I'm going to give you the ideas behind not just leaky gut, but also just general health. I mean, they work together, they're the same thing. And then finally, some support. Those are really the keys to this program. Figuring out what to eat is extremely confusing, and this video kind of sums that up, so I'm going to play it here quick.
It's me. Does your bread have any wheat in it? I'm just really wheat intolerant at the moment.
Excuse me? Do you have any more kale?
What are you eating?
It's a quinoa salad with raw almonds, goji berries, and shredded newspaper.
It's called a lemon diet. I can eat anything I like. It's just as long as it's a lemon.
Guys, who ate all the seaweed butter?
Do you have any beef that isn't grain-fed? Like, do you have a lentil-fed beef? Can you tell me the fat content of this toothpaste?
Since I started this juice cleanse, I feel so amazing. Ever since I went vegan, I've got so much more energy.
Since I gave up dairy, I found it so much easier to get a tan.
Since I stopped showering, my pores have like hardened size.
Is there a bathroom around here? I can eat one muffin every morning as long as I don't eat anything else for the rest of the day. And if I feel a bit weak, I just kind of, put the bag.
I'm on the Mediterranean diet. I only eat things from Mediterranean.
What would you recommend that looks good on Instagram?
I'm not going to eat it. It's... Is this toilet paper gluten-free? There's good salmonella, and then there's bad salmonella.
Who drank all my diet Chardonnay? Seriously not cool, guys. I'm detoxing.
Where would I find the volumetric section?
I guess I'll get the burger, but without the tomato and the lettuce and the beef and the bun.
So just mustard?
Yeah.
Type stuff.
Now you don't need to go to extremes with the new low-carb super bun from Grilled.
Kind of puts it in perspective. It can be confusing. It can be really confusing. Whether you're talking about just general health or you're talking about the gut. So this is a general guideline, and I want you guys to understand healing the gut is not one phase. It's not one arm. It's multi-phase. You have to stop the bad. You have to start the good. You have to help with supplements. You have to take care of your nervous system. It all works together. And you have to at least incorporate a portion of all of it. Otherwise, you're just sticking a bucket on a house fire. Taking one supplement or doing just one thing. Oh, I'm just going to remove soda. You're throwing a bucket on a house fire. So let's talk a little bit about what you should eat. According to the 2012 study through Harvard, published in the Journal of American Medical Association, the best diet for gut health was a low-carb diet. So this is the idea of what you want to kind of focus on. It burned the most calories, had the most improved insulin sensitivity, which is what I was talking about, which means it opened as many doors as anything. It was the best diet for maintained weight and best diet for brain function. So at the bottom you see the fibrous vegetables, including fermented vegetables. Fermented vegetables are extremely important when you're talking about the gut. So things like real sauerkraut, not processed, very simply made, kimchi, good yogurt without sucralose and aspartame. You really have to look, read labels, look for the good stuff. Things like kefir, kombucha, another thing you guys can make. These are things you can buy, these are things you can make. And they all provide you with a bunch of good bacteria. It's estimated that if you just take like kimchi is just fermented vegetables. You can buy it at health food stores. I know they carry it, the one in Rapid. What kimchi provides you, where you take, like say you take a probiotic supplement, and you get 100 million, or you get 1 billion, or you get a big high dose 30 billion count bacteria. Just a couple tablespoons of kimchi is expected to have over 1 trillion good bacteria. So what my wife and I do is basically think of it as medicine in a way, you know. Take it as not necessarily we're eating this as part of a meal as much as we are just getting in some good bacteria. So good fermented vegetables should be a large portion of what you're having. The blue arrows between the healthy fats and proteins just means that those could be interchangeable. It just didn't fit in my pyramid very nice. It made it an odd looking shape. So you want to get good healthy fats, avocado, coconut oil, things like that. Those feed the brain. That's cholesterol. That's good stuff. I know it's gotten a black eye. Cholesterol is good. That's what we want. That's what we need. Said, unsaid, bad cholesterol, LDL, it's a carrier that we absolutely have to get that food to our brain. There's a relationship to dementia and Alzheimer's, all that, based on our lack of cholesterol anymore. We just keep lowering that number in our country until it's going to go in the basement, and lo and behold, we have way more dementia, way more brain issues. And then at the very top, the little triangle should be your complex carbs. That's not your white breads and white flours. That's complex, good carbs. A few other things. Let's go through some of the other dietary things. Things that can help with good bacteria are like your black tea, your green tea. Those help rebuild and reestablish good bacteria. Flavonoids. So you can get those from like dark chocolate, believe it or not. Red wine. It's great. For a woman, 1 glass a day. For a man, as much as 2. Holla. Increases blood flow to the brain. Red wine decreases those LPS particles that I was telling you about. So very, very good when taken in the right dose. Prebiotics, fibers, things like chicory root, raw asparagus, dandelion greens of all things. You know, those little pesky things that show up. I don't know, do you guys have terrible dandelions?
Yes.
Okay. Because we do at home, I eat them. It's one thing I do spray, believe it or not. So eat the greens, but just don't eat the ones you spray. Right? I don't want to cause trouble there. But those are some ideas. Onions, I'm trying to think of a few other ones. Garlic, those are some of the highest fiber or prebiotic fiber foods that you can consume. It's thought that if we consume 30 grams, I think it's 30 grams, or every 100 grams you consume of prebiotic fiber, those foods I was just telling you about, you'll actually create 30 grams of good bacteria in your gut. So we're shooting for 10 to 12 grams a day. That's pretty good. So you want to search out those kind of foods and start consuming them. That's on that bottom level. That's down at the fibrous vegetables. It's just, you know, the concept of be careful that you don't overcook everything. If you're going to cook, try to just steam them lightly instead of getting them sauteed to the point that they're flimsy. You know how asparagus gets if you overcook it. So you want it to be firm or even raw. And that's the dietary side. I'm not giving you a ton there, but those are some things you can really implement. On the water side, water filters. Get rid of the chlorine. That's really the main one. You know, we're consuming a lot, drinking a lot of water. You're getting a lot of chlorine in certain areas. And ultimately, that's causing devastation to our gut bacteria. Another thing that you can implement is fasting. Fasting is basically water and nothing else for a 24-hour period, give or take. Then you can actually consume a few other things, but let's stick with just that. That should be done quarterly, is what the estimates say, to help get your body kicked into burning fat. It starts reestablishing good bacteria, increases our insulin sensitivity again, so some really good benefits to fasting on a quarterly basis as far as the gut is concerned. Now, the big question, which supplements? This is the one that everybody gets confused, what they should be taking. I'm going to give you a list of a few that directly relate to the gut, but ultimately directly relate to just our health in general. Probiotics. So we're getting some from our food. It's a good idea to supplement some others. If you're taking a probiotic that is not in a spore form, the one we actually use in our clinic and through this program is in a spore form, so you get more into the actual gut instead of them dying off in the stomach. The reason that when you hear people talk about these high dose of, we need 15 billion or 30 billion, it's because they know that a large majority are going to die in the stomach acid. And so we're just upping the dose, trying to get more through. Certain strains, and the strain we use, actually has a spore on it that protects it and gets it through the bad acid of the stomach and into the intestine where the spore breaks open and releases its bacteria. So we're getting more doing it that way. And the probiotic that we happen to use also, when taken with prebiotics, was actually shown to increase the health of all good bacteria in the gut when taken together. Prebiotics, we went through that. Prebiotic foods, but you can also take prebiotic fibers. The probiotic that we use has prebiotics, tapioca fiber, actually in the capsule with the probiotic. Whey protein. Whey protein, good whey protein, they are not all created equal. Whey protein concentrates are left intact and they have the good stuff still intact. What whey protein has to do with the gut, whey protein concentrate again, is that it produces a protein called a Claudin protein. Those are the proteins that make up the tight junctions. So getting a good whey protein, you're giving the body the building blocks to rebuild those tight junctions and kind of suck everything back together so we're not leaking poop. Enzymes, digestive enzymes, should be taken daily, should be taken before meals, half hour before, but as long as you're just getting them in. Digestive enzymes in this country are very deficient, is what the research says. And what they do is just help us break down the foods, break them down to a better level so we can assimilate those nutrients better. So helping our body take those on. A pH formula. Why is that important? Because there's one area, specifically one area, that should be extremely acidic and the rest of the digestive system should be very alkaline. The stomach needs to be acidic. Taking antacids is crazy. Why? Because you're actually alkalizing the very spot that we need to be acidic so that the acids kill the parasites and kill the virus and the bacteria that we're consuming and taking in. That's what acids are there for. And so when we alkalize those, we make ourselves susceptible. But what a good pH formula does is it helps increase that pH or become more basic in the intestines so that we absorb things better and keep inflammation down. B-complex vitamins. Why? It was shown in, I think that was another Harvard study, if I remember right, that most all patients with leaky gut were deficient in B vitamins. So we want to increase those B vitamins to help our body. Omegas, omega-3 fatty acids, fish oil. What do they have to do with the gut? There's what's called EPA and DHA. EPA is part of fish oil that is anti-inflammatory. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. Well, anti-inflammatory anywhere in the body is good, but we really want it in the gut. Well, it is. It's anti-inflammatory to the mucosal wall. So really, really important. It also was found that by taking omega-3 fatty acids at just 1,000 milligrams, which is really low, created an environment in the gut where good bacteria actually thrived. So very, very beneficial to the gut. Greens drink. The idea of the greens is to get more of the bottom layer of that pyramid. More vegetables, get antioxidants, you get more fiber, and you can do it all in one drink. People struggle to get those servings of vegetables in. It's really hard. If you really look at it, it's tough. So a greens drink helps you do that. It's a tool. And finally, vitamin D. Vitamin D is something, especially in this part of the country, that most everyone is at least somewhat deficient, and deficient during a certain part of the year because we're just not getting it from the sun. Vitamin D has been linked to healing the tight junctions and also decreasing inflammation in the gut. So what I recommend to most patients, if you're not getting tested, is somewhere between 3 and 10,000 IUs a day. I take anywhere from 5 to 10,000 IUs every day, unless you're exposed to the sun. Now, I don't mean, and I'm not picking on anyone, but the cowboys that are out there with only their hands and they're right here exposed to the sun, we're not really absorbing much vitamin D there. You actually have to have a large part of your skin available to take in sun to collect vitamin D. So most people, even in the summer, really are still deficient. So it began. Basically what happened was, and I came about it by accident, our program came about. And these gentlemen here are the founders of the company that I work with. And they created a system that is inclusive to exactly what I just went through. I believe they probably did it by accident. You know, I think they came up with a great system, but I don't think they were thinking about gut health. I think they were just thinking, let's provide good nutritional supplementation, let's provide a good dietary guideline. It just so happens that when I went through it, I realized the power of what it really is, and it is a system. So does everyone in here need a system? I would say no. No, I don't think that's the case. But most of you do, because most of you won't follow through with what I've been talking about unless there's some follow-up, unless you have support from somebody, unless you have guidelines that are very easy to see. Oh, I can consume these. I should be eating these things on these days. This is the reason that I chose this program, was because I found it easy to hand to my patient base. And they could understand it. And I wouldn't be spending all my time trying to explain everything when it's all right there in front of them. And that's what we have. And so, again, do I think everyone in here is going to need a program? No. But I will tell you, I've played with this in my clinic for the last 10 years. And I've come up with programs similar and ideas that are similar. But without that structure, I would say I had a 70 to 80% failure rate because people just thought it was too complicated. But once we implemented the idea of a program, something to follow, we've had closer to a 90% follow-through. So almost a total swap. So the program is really, really important. It's more than a diet, what I'm talking to you guys about. It really is our mission. You know, it's Don and Scott, myself, my wife, Clint. There's a lot of us that have really made this our mission to really get this out there. And I don't just mean the dietary, the gut health idea, but as much as just health in general. Getting people on the right supplements, getting people to follow the nutritional plan. We have to change because this is what's coming. Children today will be the first generation in history to have a shorter lifespan than their parents. Now that's my kids. No, I don't want that. You don't want that. None of us want that. And that's powerful. This is how you make that change. And if you've been listening, you understand the idea of epigenetics. You understand that some of these decisions are made by you guys before your kids are even born. You know, they say that what you consume and what you do in your lifestyle and what you're exposed to actually affects 3 generations down. So those decisions that we're making right now, what we put in our body, may affect 3 generations later. And we have to change that. That's why this has become this way. And so I guess that's the reason I came. That's the reason that we have put together this program. The company put together this program, and it's why we stand behind it very much. And it's why Scott and Don really had me here, is to give you guys an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. So, bored you long enough. I'm going to end it right there. But I appreciate you guys coming. I love a full room. This was awesome. I'm not going to open to questions out loud here, but if you guys have any questions, come grab me and I'll try to answer anything I can. So I appreciate your time.